This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to have you here. It's been a minute. The last time we gathered was right at the end of November. So it's been a while since we've had the chance to engage and see a lot of you, although we did gather with the member meeting. I should take that back. But in this kind of setting, with y'all and this intimate. So I am excited to be with you and to spend some time together engaging and learning and really listening and thinking. And that's exactly what we're going to get today. Is a wonderful presentation by Dr. John Damon, the Chief Executive Officer of Canopy Children's Solutions. And if that name rings a bell to you, that's probably because you were engaging with us in the fall, and congratulations, you win. Because he was one of our presenters during one of our weekly webinars. So I'm going to talk a little bit about John and give you some background on him, and then John will give his presentation, and then after we'll spend a few minutes just giving you some updates about what's going on at the Alliance, because there's certainly a lot happening and I want to make sure that you know. But thank you very much for taking the time to be here. I know it's always hard on a rainy day to get out of bed, let alone go to a presentation. So thank you for taking the time. We really do appreciate it. So I have had the pleasure of getting to know John now for a little bit in the last few months, and he really is an amazing man. There are some people who learn because it's their job to learn, and there are some people who learn because they are thirsty for knowledge about the world. And who just want to think and go there. And that is John. I have had many conversations with him where it's just incredible the amount of literature and knowledge that he takes in. And so he really is a learner man and inspiration, and certainly makes me feel lazy about how I am spending my free time. So I need to brush up on my history and readings just generally. But a little bit of background on John. John's clinical and executive leadership experience spans more than 25 years. He joined Canopy in 1993 and began as a therapist at the CARE Center for Jackson, and he went on to become a clinical director and serve in the capacity of CARE's Center Director and Chief Operating Officer before transitioning to his current role in 2013. As the primary public figure for the organization, John plays a critical role in fostering relationships between Canopy and other leading healthcare providers, political entities, and professional thought leaders and organizations. See, John, it's not just TV. You've got a face for the public. He has many accomplishments and organizations that he has been involved with. Just to give you a sense of some of them, he was a fellow in the 5th class of the Health Innovators Fellowship, and a member of the Aspen Global Leadership Network, which, by the way, if you ever want some really great knowledge and just things to do in your free time, listen to the Aspen Institute's programming. They have a lot of wonderful content out there. But he's also a board member of the Mississippi Business Group on Health, the Mississippi Association of Child Caring Agencies. He is working with the state and the federal government. He is involved with everything and is just a very busy man and connected. And so really, truly, we have an honor of being connected. We have the honor of being connected to John, as he has worked so hard and continues to improve the lives and outcomes of children and families in Mississippi and frankly, beyond, as they go and live their lives either in or outside of Mississippi. John is also an adjunct professor and has presented to the U.S. Senate Caucus Committee, and has had the opportunity to have 2 of his children get married in December. So congratulations, John. That is huge. Not only one child getting married, let alone 2, and to do it in the middle of a pandemic. So congratulations. And with that, I'm going to stop talking. Thank you, John, for taking the time to be here today and to present on co-constructing hope in the next normal. And with that, I turn it over to you, good sir.
Dude, thank you, Dave. It's so awesome to get to hang out with you guys a little bit. First, man, take a deep breath. 2020 is in the rearview mirror, so that's a good thing. Some neat things are unfolding in 2021, but we've also got to kind of take a collective pause here and think about this incredible moment in human history and all of our lives that we've been through. And when Dave approached me about having this talk, I said, I'd love to think together for an hour about how do we, in the next normal, how do we co-construct hope together? How do we think about that as you lead and serve in your various organizations? How do you do that in a genuine and authentic way yourself? And how do you lead others to that same spot? And so I was really excited. I thank you for having me, Dave. Thank you all for the incredible work that you all do. Mississippi, as you know, when you get outside of our little bubble across the country, you realize how special this place called Mississippi is. And so I'm thrilled to co-labor with you to kind of serve our kids and families. So thanks for the privilege and honor to get to hang out with you a little bit today. You know, I've had so many different metaphors. I've tried to summarize what is 2020. You know, I've had the Jumanji movie in my head. That's kind of 2020. You never know when the drum beat's going to start and the next thing's going to happen. I've had this kind of, you know, idea that it's a Russian nesting dolls, you know, that are crisis nested within crisis, and you're thinking, how many dolls are there? When will we get to the last one? But one that I shared with Dave, and he's like, yeah, I like that, is this idea of a snow globe. And that everything kind of, as I look about my life, seemed pretty settled. It seemed like the snow was nicely packed down and had my rhythm. As Dave said, we had a lot of movement in 2020. We got 5 kids. And so 2 of those were getting married. I have 3 graduating. So there was moving parts, some snow that was going to flurry. But as you know, 2020, somebody grabbed our snow globe and they just shook it vigorously. And everything that was kind of settled at one level in life was now very unsettled. Now, as kind of a systems theorist guy, I love it because that's what we do with families. When families are kind of trapped in this unhealthy pattern and the patterns of the family have kind of maintained themselves, you want to disrupt the homeostasis. You want to shake it up and try to reorder things a little bit. And that kind of got me thinking, you know, this snow globe shake we've had is the perfect opportunity for us to reconstruct hope in the right way going forward for our own lives and for those that we are privileged to serve and to lead. And that's what I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about today. And one way to think about this snow globe being shaken vigorously is it's a crisis, right? It's a disruption. And I wanted to just remind that at the very core, go to Webster, definition of crisis, it just means a turning point. For better or worse. It doesn't mean bad. Crisis, when I always think about crisis is a bad thing. Definition of a crisis is a turning point for better or for worse. The Chinese have 2 characters for the same word crisis, one that means danger and one that means opportunity. And so when you think about crisis, you know, think of it as a triangle in its tip, and how you intervene on top of it in the moment that you're in determines if this crisis moment, if the snow globe shake moment is going to tip towards danger or will it tip toward opportunity. So really what I wanted us to think together on today is how do we tip it to opportunity? How do we take all that we've been through, the collective trauma we've been through, how do we take all of that and use it for the good, use the disruption of the system to tip this thing toward opportunity? I want us to think about that a little bit. So here's 4 big points for today that I want to kind of think, and I usually don't do the alliteration thing, but I sometimes it's a little stickier to remember, so I did the alliteration thing just to maybe hopefully for retention purposes. But first, I want to talk about how to recognize or recognize or rethink what has been lost in our lives recently. And from there, how do we then construct realistic hope, which is very distinct from hope that's not based in realism and based in that's really a wish and not hope. And then third, I want to think about how do we strengthen our resilience, and what are some of the strategies to build resiliency as we move toward hope. And then finally, how do we kind of rally the relationships around us that really make it all possible? That's the only way we can get there. So that's kind of where we're going. So let me start at the beginning about how to recognize what has been lost. Every epic narrative that you read, from the Odyssey to, I don't know if you consider Luke Skywalker, I think it's an epic story. It picks up in the third, or I guess fourth book, if you will, the opening movie, and oddly that movie is about hope, and it's about Luke's coming into this story that already has begun. But we see that with Odysseus, or with Luke, or with every hero. To become the hero, they first have to go into the hero's cave. They have to go into that dark spot, that hard place, to really have that inner battle with what keeps them from actualizing their full potential as a leader, as a hero. And so the first step on our journey, as we think about the snow globe of our life that's been shaken, and this is by far, and I'm not just saying this because I'm the mental health guy, I mean, I am, but the hardest part of the journey to hope is this journey of 18 inches from your head to your heart, to really step into the cave and to really count the cost of what's been lost. Because without that, you know what needs to be done, but you don't know what needs to be done. And that's a big, big difference. Just to share a little bit on my own life and that, and how I've experienced that. When I was 10, pre-10, had this crazy fairy tale, awesome life. We had houses in different places. Life was good. Then my grandfather began to drink and became an alcoholic, and the company that he and my dad owned just quickly began to disintegrate, as did their marriage. And when he moves out of state, my mom, who's never had to work because she didn't have to, is now back to learn a skill and then go back to school to be a teacher. She's out of town getting training. And my sister and I, younger sister, were at home with a babysitter for a week or whatever it was that mom had to go out to be trained. And I remember the night very vividly. We were playing hide and go seek, and I thought my sister was behind the couch. And I remember tilting this kind of silky lampshade to angle it back behind the couch to see if she was there. And we went to bed that night, and apparently did not cut the lamp off, and it caught on fire, and our whole house burned down to the ground. And my sister and I were both pulled out of the window and saved, and but we lost everything. And it was a couple key people in my life at that time that stepped into it and helped me really not just move on in life, because that's one thing. So it's not just trying to get to hope from there, but before you can get to hope, you've got to really count the cost of what was lost. You had to really count the cost of, my best friend at that time, my dog, Pete, old English sheepdog that died. The baseball card collection, the pennant collection, my autograph collection, all these things. And of course, every family picture of the really happy times, that was all lost. And to be able to move toward hope in life, it had to be preceded by counting the cost and validating what had been lost. That was the first and most important step in that journey. And for us collectively, we've all been through so much in 2020, with our kids, with our families, work, school, the milestones. Dave mentioned I had 2 kids get married in the last 8-9 weeks, and 3 graduations, but we've missed proms, we've missed homecomings, we've missed all the senior stuff that should go down. It's not. My kids basically missed her whole senior year, like many of you. I could go down the list, loved ones, jobs, it's been a lot of trauma. And when you go through that many things, as we all have, it's real easy, because the Russian nesting doll analogy, we just keep uncovering the next crisis. And you can kind of get on this mode where you're living on adrenaline. The gazelle that's always running from the line, and you got enough energy to get to the next thing and then avoid the next crisis and then avoid. But humans were not made to run forever from the line. We're just not. And if this is a talk on the biology of the brain and how it structural changes that happen and the cortisol levels and blah, 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 that all happen under ongoing stress. Trauma impacts the entire human organism. And so this is so important for us to think about hope, because the real challenge in getting to hope is you have to honor where you are to get there. And to give you a little backdrop, pre-2020, I'm thinking about your employees, I'm thinking about your own family members, yourself, your friends, your community groups. Even before all that we've been through recently, people come into 2020 not with a blank slate. And I'm going to go through these quick, but I just think it's important for you as leaders and in our community to have a backdrop of who's walking into work with you every day, and what kind of pre-2020 conditions are going on. There's this great study, the most comprehensive study done ever, on really what's driving long-term physical health, not mental health, physical health consequences like disability, chronic disease, early death, all of these things. And this was done by the CDC in Atlanta and Kaiser Permanente, and really they were looking at actuarial numbers. They're really looking at what's driving our costs. They weren't really thinking about mental health or anything like that. What's driving our cost? And if you look at this, who all is in this group, it's a very skewed distribution of people. In other words, well, let me say, first of all, it's 17,000 people. And I did research. If I got 100 people in my study, I'm doing a backflip. 100 people is phenomenal. 17,000 people. The statistical power of that is pretty irrefutable. But then who's involved in the study, you can see it's a very privileged group. 74% of these people went to college, 100% of them all have insurance. So you kind of have a best case scenario. So in a best case scenario, who are the people, okay, and what's going on with them? And what we found, A stands for adverse childhood events. They asked 10 questions trying to think about physical health, and they added these, didn't know they were going to find what they found. 3 buckets of abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction: physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and then neglect, emotional, physical. But then these household dysfunctions: mental illness in the family, someone's been arrested, divorce, domestic violence, and substance abuse. And so each one of these that you would answer yes to was a 1. So if 3 of these were true in your life, then you had an ACE score of 3. And what they found was pretty phenomenal. 1 in 4 people had at least 2. 1 in 16 had 4. 22% of everybody in this very biased sample, best case scenario sample, if you will, 22% have been abused as children sexually. 66% of the women had experienced domestic violence. 50% women were 50% more likely to experience 5 ACEs or more than men. And if you had 1 ACE, you had an 87% chance that you'd have more. So what that means is the presence of these childhood experiences impact your social, emotional, cognitive abilities that lead you to adopting health risk behaviors that lead to disease and disability, that lead to early death. A very clear pathway. And we see that across all sorts of physical health outcomes, okay? The more ACEs, you can see, the more obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide, STDs, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, broken bone, you name it. Now, why this is so important, why I just want to just insert this real quickly, is the hardest part of what I'm talking about the journey to hope is that journey in the cave for each person and each person you lead. Because if we want to get to hope and thriving, it requires that you step out of surviving. And it requires reapproaching difficult things like Luke did, in the cave, who his father is and all that stuff. Because you've got to move from knowing to knowing. The Greek word to know, the gnoska, versus Dave and I were talking, I'm trying to learn Hebrew right now. Their word for to know is yada, or yada, which is not an intellectual knowledge, it's an intimate experiential knowledge. And that's what we're talking about here. You can't just know your story, you got to know it. To move forward, to move from just surviving to thriving, to move forward in the journey requires a validation, to bear witness to what's happened, to reapproach what's happened. French word there is rapprochement, to come back to reapproach those things that have been so difficult for you. Because it's in that moment and dealing with the cave stuff that we really get to not just personally step into hope, but teach others how to step into realistic hope. Not wish. And I'll distinguish those in a minute. Not wish. I don't want to lead people to wishing. I want to lead people to true, real hope. So that's number one. Okay, that's our first R. The second one is not just to recognize or remember or reflect. That's all in that first cave piece. But the second one now is, how do you cast and have a realistic hope? Okay, and how do you inoculate your brain to what is real hope? And I want to start with telling you about Admiral Stockdale. If you've not heard about or read about the Stockdale paradox, it might be worth a read. But Admiral Stockdale is the highest ranking military officer to ever be held as a prisoner of war. He was held in the Vietnam War in Hanoi, in the Hanoi Hilton. I think it was over 8 years. He was tortured over 20-something times. It was brutal. It's terrible. But he survived, and when he got out, one of the things that he was asked about was how many of his colleagues who received the same food, who received the same abuse and the same neglect and all of that, how they died, but he thrived. And they were like, what was the difference? I mean, why are you thriving and they didn't make it? And his frame was very interesting. He said, those who didn't make it were the optimists. And when I hear, I like to be an optimist. That's what I like to see myself as, an optimist. But it's about having the right kind of optimism, the right kind of hope, not a false one. What Stockdale commented on was his colleagues that didn't make it, who had the false kind of hope, what they believed was that they would be home for Christmas. And then Christmas came and went, and Christmas came and went, and Christmas came and went, and they never made it home. Stockdale, on the other hand, said he had a realistic hope, and his hope was, I will be home for Christmas. But it will not be this Christmas, probably not next Christmas, probably not the one after that, probably not the one after that, but eventually I will be home for Christmas. And so it's this quote, you must never confuse faith that you can and will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be. And this is very important with all that we've been going through in the human brain and how trauma works and how trauma impacts, particularly if you hadn't dealt with the cave, how it repings all of these other traumas, that it's critical for us to inoculate our brains to the next normal of where we are, which means you can't think that as soon as we get to January, we're going to be good. As soon as we get a new administration in, we're going to be good. As soon as we get the vaccine in, we're going to be good. We've moved into a next normal where the norm is going to be constant change. And if you keep coming back to a mindset that says, we'll be out of this by Christmas, we'll be out of this by Christmas, you eventually lose hope and give up. That's why the other people didn't make it. Instead, we have to have a realistic view and perspective of the next reality, the next normal of what it really is. And in that grounding, inoculate our brains. I came across this letter from C.S. Lewis, 1943 this year, that really summed up for me how I need to properly think about the moment that we're in. And he said this, he said, The great thing, if one can, is to stop regarding all the unpleasant things as interruptions of one's own or real life. The truth is, of course, that what one calls the interruptions are precisely one's real life. The life God is sending one day by day. What one calls one's real life is a phantom of one's own imagination. And I that's been very helpful for me to inoculate my mind with the constant barrage of change and interruptions from COVID and political unrest and racial injustice and what has been happening, that we can't wait to get back to our real life. This is our real life. And the sooner we come around to that, the sooner we'll grab onto realistic hope as we move forward. So those are just a couple ideas there. Also to think about hope as this bridge between the impossible and the possible. And we are really, I think, just expected to have this co-responsibility together to construct a culture together of hope. There's a lot of definitions of what hope is. Okay, Webster talks about the desire with expectation of attainment and fulfillment, or Oxford says grounds for believing that something good may happen. Okay, cue in on that word. But really, when you get down to the science of hope, many say the word hope when what they really mean is wish. I hope you have a good day. I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow. I hope that everything gets better. But really, hope is the belief that your future can be brighter and better than your past. And this is important, and you can actually have a role to play in making it better. Wishful people believe their future can get brighter. I'm wishing it's going to go. I hope I get that job. I wish I can get that. Wish I can get that. But they don't necessarily have the goals and the critical thinking and the pathway to actually make that happen. Hopeful people are willing to work for their better future. And that's kind of what part of what I wanted to dial you in on today. The science of hope. Rick Schneider, who's a hope scientist, does some amazing work. If you want to read some of his stuff, I love his phrase and title in this book, "You can get there from here." And he holds out and has bared out in the research that there's hope has got three critical ingredients. One, you've got to have a clear goal. Two, you got to have a clear way to get there, the pathway or the way power. And three, you got to have the agency or the willpower. So goal, way, and a will. And those all go together to create realistic hope. Goals, the first one, it's in every part of our life. I mean, you had to have a goal to even get on this call today, and when to get there and how to, there's short-term goals, and there's long-term goals about degrees or career trajectories or what have you. But the goal has to be desirable enough to motivate you to do something, to actually take action. Things that excite you and focus your planned attention and action. So hope is not about an impulse, it's about intention. And intentions this is really what I've had to find for me. Intentions are what link us to why we do what we do, and deep down what we believe. And when it's disconnected from deep down what we believe, we're just not going to have the behavior to pull it off. For example, we can know that cake is bad for us, but we can believe that it'll make us happy. Now, which one are we going to do? You're going to go with what you believe, not what you know. And so, like for me trying to lose weight and stuff like that, I have to link. I don't want to go run today because I like running or because I want to lose weight, or because I want to link going to run today so I can walk my daughter down the aisle, so I can be there for grandkids. So you got to link it back to the why, not just a what. And that links our beliefs about ourselves and others. And that's what makes the goal sticky and work. The second part of hope is not just having a goal, but also having a pathway. How do you get to the goal that you've set? And hopeful people always identify a pathway. And pathways and roadmaps allow you to kind of check your progress along the way. When you put in your GPS and you know if you're using Waze or Maps or Apple, Google, whatever your app you're using, when there's traffic, it'll tell you, or if there's a wreck or something, and it'll reroute you. And good ways or good paths toward goals do the same thing. You get blocked in one area, you reroute around another way. And hopeful people find alternate pathways. That's what you're going to do. And what's cool about this too, when you have a path and you have a way, just like on your map, my kids like yours are always asking how long till we get there, how much longer. You can see on your GPS how, not only where you're going, your goal, but you can look back, not just through the windshield, but you can look in the rearview mirror and see how far you've been. And knowing that you've covered distance and ground creates more hope because you've seen I'm making progress. So clear goal, a clear path that's flexible but also is measurable is huge. And then the third part of hope, of the science of hope, is to have agency or willpower. So this is the motivational aspect of hope. This is having people in your life who are going to be cheerleaders for you, who are going to be your close friends and your mentors and those who will speak truth in your life and spur you on and that sort of thing. Agency talks about our ability to dedicate mental energy or willpower to begin and sustain the journey to the goal. Gandhi, strength doesn't come from physical capacity, it comes from an indomitable will. Dan Millman, willpower is the key to success. Successful people strive no matter what they feel. It's important, feelings are deceiving. They strive no matter what they feel by applying their will to overcome apathy, doubt, and fear. But here's the thing, here's what we know about science of willpower. You got a limited amount each day. It's finite. It's connected to our glucose levels in our blood. That's why if I don't do my walk and run first thing in the morning, I'm just done because my willpower, my ability to make good willpower decisions in the day and eat cake by the end of the night, it's just terrible. All right. So when you exert your willpower through the day, you're depleting some of that glucose that results in that mental fatigue that leads you to make stupid decisions. Okay. That's why most bad things in college and everything happen late at night, right? You're stupid by the end of the night. So what increases our willpower? How do we, if it's limited and we're going to end up not being as on our best, how do we then have continued and sustained willpower? It comes through support. It comes through people. It comes through your relationships. It comes through those coaches. It comes through your spouse or your partner is going to hold you accountable to get there. And your workforce team is going to say, hey, did you have one of my board members I went and met with yesterday? As we're walking out the door, did you run today? Thank you, Robert. Yes, I did. That's what it takes. All right. It takes people around us to sustain that way. You can't just do it on your own. So the summary of this, kind of thinking about hope, is the three things: the goal, the destination, it's the minivan. You have the destination, short and long trips. You got the path, the map to get there, and you got to have the agency or the will, the engine in the van, if you will, that helps you navigate the pathway. And that when you run low on fuel, you replenish it. You replenish it with the people around you that are going to drive you toward that goal. So path and will, huge to make the journey, but a path without will leads to lower hope because you lose motivation. And a will without a path is just a wish, and you won't get there. You can wish all day that you're going to accomplish X, Y, or Z, but you're not going to make it on just willpower alone. So, number one, recognize the fact that you've got to reflect on and recognize what's been lost. Two, foster a realistic hope. Number three, now, how do you strengthen your resilience? And what are some of the strategies to do that? So here's my Russian nesting dolls. The absence of resilience leaves us with the presence of stress. All right, we can talk about all kind of consequences of stress, but in short, they bear themselves out in our relationships, in our health, and in the way we work. And that's pretty well documented. And the way I like to kind of think about resiliency is just a metaphor of some people are born naturally a dandelion, and some people are born naturally an orchid. Okay, if you've had dandelions in your yard, you know they're the most resilient plant on the planet. Okay, they grow through the concrete. You can spray them with Roundup, they're coming back. They're just naturally resilient. On the other hand, orchids, we love orchids. We've got them in our house. My wife's much better at caring for them. But orchids are very delicate creatures. They require just the right number of ice cubes per, I don't remember, week or month. All right, you got to do just these 2 ice cubes or whatever. They got to have the temperature right. They need to have the lighting right. But if the context, if the environment around the orchid is right, it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Gorgeous. And people are the same. Some people are just naturally resilient. They have these traumatic childhoods and terrible things, and they just grow into the concrete. You can't stop. And some people need to have the context and environment just right for them to thrive. But when it comes to resiliency and the research on resiliency, the good news is that resiliency can be learned. In other words, you may be born an orchid, but you can become a dandelion. You can learn the skills of being a dandelion because there's natural resilience that we just talked about, born with it. And these natural resilient people just love to play, learn, explore. There's an adaptive resilience though, where you've been through some trials, and through the trial, you learn to be more resilient. And then there's restored resilience, like you were born with it, but you lost it because of a lot of things that have happened. But now you're learning the reskilling and restoring natural resilience that you had maybe at one point in life that you're now regaining. Those characteristics of people who are resilient, they see change as an opportunity. They have a relentless commitment. They recognize their own limits. We know that it's possible that you can be resilient in one domain of your life, like at work, and you're killing it at work, but then you really struggle at home and your marriage or as a parent or whatever. And so that's a whole nother talk there. But resilience can be present in your life before a stressor, like born a dandelion, but it can also be developed in response to stress. And that's the opportunity of this 2020 snow globe. The resiliency opportunity there for us to learn from those things and to tip that triangle over toward opportunity, toward hope. So what contributes to resilience? There's a bunch of stuff here. The one thing that I want you to remember is the number one predictor or contributor to your resilience in your life is positive relationships. It's also the number one predictor of healthcare. It's all kind of, if you don't have a small group of people around you to whom you've given permission to speak truth to you and you to them, and that you know they're for you and they know you're for them, and therefore in the context of that safe relationship, you can be pretty dang direct with each other. If you don't have that, then you're decreasing your ability to be resilient in life. Okay, because you're always putting on the front, you're trying to be, how are you? Good, how are you? Fine, that's great. Everybody, that's what we do in the South, right? And that's fine. I mean, there's no time to have that conversation at Kroger. But at some point, with the right people, and somebody says, how are you? Man, I've had a terrible week. Let me tell you what happened. That increases our resiliency, okay? Also, positive self-image, positive attitude, realistic plans that are carried out, managing our feelings, good communication and problem skills. All of these pieces contribute to resiliency. There's lots of ways to promote it, okay? And in your organizations that you're in, you can kind of think about your own plans and what you have in place to support your people. Our EAP, if you have an employee assistance program, I don't remember how many sessions, I think we have maybe 12 that every employee can get mental health counseling. I think it's 12 sessions, them and their family members, and encouraging taking advantage of that and having life coaches and that sort of thing. That's a wonderful resource for your people. But there's also ways to build resilience on your own. I can get Dave this building resiliency plan worksheet if y'all would like it. It's kind of a self-assessment and a plan of how I can build resiliency in my life. One example of that is Dr. Shrini's 4-factor approach. It says basically, okay, here's how you got to think about something that's happened. State the fact, place the blame where it belongs, reframe it, and give yourself some time. Okay, and flesh that out with an example. So let's say you're in a pretty bad car wreck. It's not life-threatening, but it's still pretty significant. And you got to go stay overnight in the hospital for a night or two. One way to roll that would not be resilient is to continue to perseverate how terrible it was, and I almost died, and I still think, and I'm going to have these and you continue to magnify the event. Okay, well, resiliency talk and approach would be to state the facts. I mean, you have to honor what happened. It was a terrible wreck. Yeah, I got banged up. I called for help. but at the end of the day, I'm going to be okay and my car's going to get fixed. That's where we are. Taking the ownership. Yeah, I ran the stop sign. That was on me. Okay, not putting blame out there or some nebulous thing. Reframing and offer a silver lining. You know, it was bad, but it could have been a lot worse, and I'm really thankful. You're building in resiliency language in the narrative of your life and how you're viewing the world and the things around you. And then you got to give yourself some permission to take time to heal, physically, emotionally, and otherwise. And that's how on a daily practice, the self-talk and narrative builds resiliency. Rattle off some key strategies that I just want to share with you guys. I mentioned the other one. The number one is that positive connections with others, to have those deeper, not wider relationships to share your life with. I had breakfast this morning with a couple of guys that are squarely in that group for me, and just being able to share life at a deep level, not just wide surface stuff, but real life. To limit your news and social media. If you hadn't done that already, I really want to encourage you to do that. I'm not saying don't keep up with what's happening in the world, but you also got to push away from a buffet at some point, right? And instead of just doing that, find other sources of real inspiration, like things that you want to read, or TED Talks, or going for a walk, things that really bring you inspiration. Plug into that as opposed to the 24-hour cycle. And then give yourself permission to be where you are. We talk about that a lot in our organization. It's okay to be where you are. It's just not okay to stay there. So on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're a 2, that's all good. Be a 2 for right now. But what's the plan to be a 3? That's the key. So give yourself permission to be where you are, but you can't give yourself permission to stay there. Getting moving. Long talk I could give on the value of running, yoga, exercise, all these things to increase your endorphins and blah, blah, blah. Huge part of the journey of resiliency and hope is moving. Also, remembering a time when you felt resilient, going back and remembering, in ancient days, they built altars to remember this time, this place, this moment of something significant happened, because at some point in the future, you're going to forget and you can lose hope, but you can kind of come back to an altar and go, I remember that. I remember the time then. And so remember, tap into that reservoir when you've killed it, when you've done something really great, and remember that. And take time to unplug devices and again, plug into something that's deeply recharging for you. Deep cycle charge stuff, like taking off that week and doing something that brings a deep cycle charge to your life. That's what we're talking about. Identifying good role models. I mean, who do you have around you? Who's your mentor? Who are you emulating in your life? If you go, I don't really have them, but find somebody who seems to be thriving and resilient and hopeful, even in difficult circumstances, and get on their hip. Go to lunch with them, go to breakfast with them, learn from them, see what they're doing, and emulate that. I'm not good at this one, but I've read this. I should be, because I'm convinced on the literature, but to journal your journey. And it's not only helpful to just have a narrative of life, but to go back at those markers and look back and see what all has changed. Another whole talk is being mindful, and I'm sure you've all been through mindfulness training, but being mindful and fully present in the here and now, and not mindful. I can be easy at one of my kids' games or whatever, and I'm physically present, but mentally not, because I'm mindful. I'm not being mindful of the exact moment I'm in and where I'm feeling and what I'm thinking and what I'm watching. That's huge. And then the last one here is creating hope and not wish. And again, the 3 pieces of hope: a goal, a will, and a way, not just a wish. Last point, guys, and then we'll wrap up. If you've got any questions or whatever, awesome. The last point I just want to wrap up, the R, is on relationships, and how the only way to achieve radical healing and radical hope is to do that together. A resilient life has mental health and financial implications. It's not just about trying to be positive. It's building a sense of social, psychological, physical resources that give you satisfaction, independence, competence around your life, your goals, and your values. And you got to remember, as I said earlier, about kind of giving yourself permission to be where you are. Remember too that the change is not a linear process. It's very circular. Now the scatter plots might be up and to the right, but the process of change is very messy. And we go through stages of change and where we are and ready to do it and all that kind of stuff. So remember that through that, when you're going ups and downs, resiliency helps you to manage that expectation across time. It helps you to reset and reframe setbacks when you were cycling up and now you're not doing as good. You were doing really good losing weight, and now you drop the ball again, right? And instead of just getting all upset that you dropped it again and spiraling down, building in resilience helps you to really see this setback as an opportunity for growth, to spot the stinky thinking and the self-talk that we do, and capture that and take that thought kind of captive, and then focus on what you can control. Whole serenity prayer thing there, right? Focus on what you can control, not fall victim into the victim role. That keeps you with a positive outlook with the future and a growth mindset as you move forward. But the journey here that we've been talking about toward hope, it just has to be done together. I'm a Lord of the Rings big fan. I guess almost can't have a PowerPoint with something Lord of the Rings, but that voyage in the cave and Frodo and his team, whatever. When you have that kind of moment and you come out and you're ready to help lead, whether that's in your family, or your community, your place of worship, or your organization, whatever it is, you have to do that leading after you've been in the cave and you're ready to help lead others on the journey to hope. You have to have a team around you to help carry the weight of that forward. And of course, I'm very concerned, as we all are, about the isolation effects of 2020, of my kids and others. We're made for relationships, and when we're pulled apart from each other, and relationships at the core of who we are, it's hard. We're made to share our journeys together. We're made to journey together, and to share with one another what we've collectively learned, and to share our journeys with one another. It's a great quote from a group therapist, or he wrote all these texts on group therapy, and Irv Yalom, and he said, "By the crowd we have been broken, and by the crowd we shall be healed." That we're kind of made and hurt in relationships, we're also healed in relationships. And so that cave journey it's also got to be wrapped by a great relational experience of how you reapproach relationships and move that forward. And living in a very authentic way is hard because it requires you to live vulnerably with others. That's the real way this journey of hope goes. And that's why I started with the cave piece, because you really can't do that collective live life in a hopeful way with a group of people also committed to that same goal if you hadn't done that hard work, because you can't live vulnerably. You can't live authentically. You can't live being real out here because you've never really done that with yourself back here. And so that's just, I've just, for me at least, I found that to be so critical with great leaders that I've been able to get to know. They all have had a cave thing. They've all had to find themselves so that they could come out and be very vulnerable and real. And that makes them a great leader. It makes other people want to follow, and it gives you a great privilege to then take other people on a journey to learn to not have a false hope, but to have a real hope. So you can only lead someone on this journey, I think, that you've walked yourself. It's hard to give. You can't give, I think, what you've not received. And as nonprofit leaders, we don't walk this journey and do this hard work just to kind of hide it. Our call, and what I try to do, and what I know we all try to do, is to be hope and light in a very hopeless and dark space in our communities right now. And that requires difficult work, and that requires being grounded in what hope is. And our, my experience is kind of two ways to live life. One is in the mirror, where you're trying to take care of you. And as we talked to those of you on the call at the beginning, I hate being on camera because I got the face for radio, but the more you look in the mirror, the more depressed you get. And that's just not for those who don't look great. It's just life. You're going to get more and more disappointed in you the more you look just in the mirror. I live in life not in the mirror, but through the window, where you look out to see the needs for other people. And you look out to see what you can contribute to, and use the strength of your own journey to reach out to others, to help them also join that journey. That's good stuff. So in sum, one, recognize or recognize or reflect or revisit what has been lost in the fire. That's the toughest journey in this whole deal, the journey of 18 inches from here to here. Second, foster realistic hope. Remember the Stockdale principle, C.S. Lewis quote, the formula for hope. It's got to have the three pieces, the goal, the will, and the way. That's realistic hope that you can actually build on. Third, how to have a plan to strengthen your resilience. Orchids can become dandelions, but you can't, it's not just going to happen. You have to work at it to be that. And fourth, you've got to rally relationships. Radical hope and healing can only happen in the context of relationships. And that's what's so cool about the Alliance and pulling us all together. We can kind of serve as that source of iron sharpening iron, if you will, for each other along this journey. So with that, you have a 21 snow globe in front of you. The snow that's been up in the air, you've got this amazing opportunity to resettle the flakes back down in a healthy way, to resettle the flakes back down that's been disrupted in your home and in your work and in your kids and you have this amazing opportunity to resettle those flakes back down under a foundation of realistic hope that 21 can. You can not just wish that it's going to be the best year ever. You can have genuine hope that it will, and work hard to make that happen. So with that, I will close and thank you guys so much for hanging out for a little bit and see if there's any. Hopefully, the best parts are always the Q&A. It's usually the only thing I remember when somebody talks. So with that, I'll just open it up. If anybody's got thoughts, questions, observations, critiques, I'm open to all of them. So thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank you, John. That was amazing, and certainly has left me with lots. And the 18 inches is, since you and I first spoke about it in December, is something that really sticks with me. And I remember, there's a lot of things that stick with me, but the other one is that you got to put the work into it. That it's not something that's going to happen by accident. And I think it's very timely, and there's something really powerful about all of us collectively going through this very traumatizing time together. I think it would be wholly different if we were trying to do this alone. And I think, there's power in connection. And so I really appreciate everything you said in your time, and I've loved this. As John said, we'd love to open it up and hear from you all, thoughts, comments, questions. We've got plenty of time left. So John has finished early, so we have time for engagement. Hi, Mary Ellen.
I have a question for John. John, that was fabulous. It was just what I needed to hear, based in a lot of grounded background that you've obviously done over your life. I've been reading the book. I've been, of course, like you, trying to lose weight. And the author that I was reading referred to a lizard brain, and then our Labrador brain, and then our human brain.
That's
and
good.
Are you familiar with the lizard brain?
Yes, I'm hearing the different brain talks. In fact, a great book, if you haven't read it, I just read over the break, is called The Body Keeps the Score. And it is just fantastic of the kind of what you're talking about, kind of the hind brain, kind of old ancient brain, the midbrain, and then the forebrain. And it's how it's impacted by trauma. And it is so powerful. Well, and it's a little freeing too, right? When you realize it's not me, I'm not just crazy. It's just how we're wired. It's how we're made. It's how the brain works. And so if I heard you, it was a little muffled on my end, but did I speak to your question? I didn't know that I heard it.
Yeah, no, you did perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, I would look, if you get a chance to, it's a little on the heady side, on the science side. And let me give you another book that was just another one that took a lot of that research, but made it much more digestible. Was called Hope Rising. Hope Rising. It was just a fantastic book. In fact, I'm on the Children's Justice Commission with the Supreme Court, and we're doing a whole push with this book and the authors and working with the authors around how do we take the various systems in our state, Department of Human Services, Child Protection Services, the court system, blah, 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 and start to infuse this kind of hope. And so we're working with those authors too. And so that's a very digestible book. It's kind of written not only as a clinician might read it, but just as an end user for my own life, how do I have that kind of hope? So I'd highly encourage that book too. And it gets into some of the brain pieces you were talking about too. It's fantastic.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your encouragement too. It's very gracious of you.
Tanya, who isn't able to join us by microphone, says, thank you, John and Dave. This was much needed. Dan, will you please email the plan to build resiliency to John, or Dave? Sure. Yes, once I get my hands on that, I will definitely email that out to everybody. Yes, absolutely. Amber says, great info, John. I would love the presentation. I really like the snow globe example. So we will do our best, folks, to get you those resources. Let's see here. Anybody else?
That's really awesome. And Dave, I'll be sure to get you the PowerPoint and the that self-guided piece on resiliency, which is really great to work through. You know, and just want to encourage everybody. I mean, another picture that comes to my mind is in that last point we talked about relationships. And it's been so hard, right, with COVID. But you know, my kids do a lot of s'mores at our house, right? They're a big s'more maker. And one thing you've noticed, you know, you can't have a fire with one log. It won't stay lit. And I think you're the same way. I think we're the same way. We need other logs also on fire around us that keeps that motivation going, that keeps us burning, and that willpower, if you will. So anyhow, I just had that metaphor pop in my head when we were talking. I thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I was talking to someone the other day, and you know, this is collective work. This is not, you know, if we were working alone, I don't think any of us would make it very far, just because it's too reliant on people and collective, a collective mindset. And so I totally agree with you. I think it's fundamental to how we approach this work. Michelle, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm curious how this connected to you. You know, you work with, you know, you're in the United Way, and you work with a lot of organizations and a lot of communities, and certainly with kids with your new project. I'm curious if you see any of this in the work that you are engaged in.
Yes. Hey, John, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am not going to put my face up here, so I get to choose that and feel confidence in that.
That's good.
But, you're exactly right, Dave. And I think what really hit home for me as I was listening to what you were sharing, John, is the difference between wish and belief. I think I hear a lot of people that I work with wishing for something better. And like it was, and my big thing at the end of last year is that everybody seemed to think that when the ball dropped on 2020, that the world was just going to go back to normal. I can't wait till 2020 is over. And I think a lot of realists realize that this was going to last much longer. And you do have to take the steps that you had put in place so that we can ensure that we make it the way we need to make it. I am a firm believer that every day you get to wake up and choose which direction you're going to go in. And I love what you said, and we'll be using it a lot when people talk to me about how I wish it could be better. we make it the best that we can make it every day that we wake up, and continue to stay focused on our mission and what we are doing. And, it may not be the best, and it may not be normal, and it may not be what we wanted, but as long as we are trying and moving forward, then you should get kudos for that. So John, thank you for sharing, because it reestablished a lot of the things that I am already currently thinking.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that. That's beautiful. That's really great.
It reminded me, so as someone who was a former educator, one of the things that really touches me is, and a lesson that I try to keep in mind, is how resilient our kids are. So often undercut the strength that they have and devalue their perspectives, and it's really impressive how children they learn these lessons. This is, it's almost sort of, as we get older, I think this might be one of those things, the wishing and the hoping, we sort of, it's just like creativity. We sort of teach ourselves the negative side when we start from a much more proactive and positive place. And I think, sometimes looking to children is really a wonderful tool and resource, because they can teach us a whole lot about this.
And Dave, I do want to add to that. I was blessed during probably one of my lowest times last year with a group of children who wanted to understand what volunteering was about and understand the target issues, and then create projects based upon their understanding and what they could do to give back. And, last year, I'm sure everybody felt a point in their lives where they're like, what's the point? I mean, whatever we do, we're not going to change anything. And then God just put in my life that very moment, those group of children that were we're going to make this happen. We're going to rock and roll. And they were definitely my inspiration to keep keeping it on.
That's beautiful, and that's such a great point, Michelle and Dave. Thank you for bringing up kids, because we can learn a lot, right, out of the mouth of babes. But one thing that to give us hope as adults is to think about this. Like, I remember as a kid, back when there was construction in our neighborhood, back a long time ago, you could collect those Coke bottles. Do y'all remember this? You could collect Coke bottles and turn them in for money. 10 cents. I mean, we would live on ices as a kid, but between our neighborhood and the Totem store where you could buy the icy, there was this big field, okay, with a lot of kind of tall wheat, I guess. I don't know what it was. And so we would beat down a path across that field, right, a very direct line right to the Totem, so we could get our icy. But then it would rain, or we'd go on vacation or whatever, and we'd come back and that grass would be grown back up, right? And you'd have to cut a new path. You'd have to find a new way. The brain is the same way. So this is the hope for the adults. Kids are so crazy resilient because of the neuroplasticity of their brain that when something's blocked, they just go around a new route. Their neuro pathway finds another way to get to the Totem. We'll just do this. We'll just do that. We'll just do this. Adults, we get rigid in our brain, and we think, no, it's just this one path. That's the only way to get to the Totem. And that's when we have the problem. The rigidity is what breaks. Okay, so what we're talking about today is how to create real hope, is about creating that neuroplasticity of many options. Remember, it takes a goal, a will, and a way. The way has to be highly flexible. And when you're too rigid, you snap. But if we can do what y'all said and learn from our kids about many ways, and there's all kind of cool, for example, they did a competition of who could build the highest tower out of straws and something, bubble gum or whatever. And they did MIT graduate students in engineering, architectural students from Harvard, cream of the crop grad students. And they compared them against, I think they were kindergartners. And the kindergartners built almost twice as big a tower as the brilliant people were able to do. Why? Well, a lot of it's because they can't work well together, because they all think they're right? So we got a lot to learn there. But kids would quickly, and this is back to the final R, the relationship side. Kids, when somebody suggested something, instead of going, well, here's why it won't work, here's 1, 2, and 3 why it won't work, like these guys did, they went, that's good, let's try it. So they just tried and they tried and experimented and worked together as a group over and over and over. And before you know it, they had the biggest tower more than all these brilliant people. And so there's so much, I'm just riffing off what y'all said. There's so much to learn from kids about resiliency, their natural neuroplasticity, sure, but we can do that too. And we can also learn to work as a group very different by being open to everybody's ideas and trying things as opposed to being rigid. So anyhow, that was good comments, y'all.
Yeah, you know, I mean, again, I won't keep harping on children, but it reminds me of language acquisition and the idea of fossilization, right? So that, you know, we, as children, your brain hears all sounds, and that's why it takes a minute for them to be able to speak fluently, is because they have to filter out all the other things that aren't relevant to their primary language. Whereas as adults, you know, you often find, it exists, a fossilization where your brain stops being able to add new sounds, new vocabulary, or when you're learning a new language, you sort of reach a certain threshold. So it's interesting. They can teach us a lot.
No doubt, no doubt.
Dina, thank you for your comment in the chat. Just to read it out for everybody, I think the info you gave on what prevents hope is true and very impactful for us to use at But God Ministries in our work with the Mississippi Delta. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a great ministry.
Yeah. So, well, before I start talking about the Alliance and some things coming up that I want to point you to, any other thoughts, comments? Just open the floor up for anybody. Going once, going twice. I know y'all are rushing to that unmute button. I can feel it. All right. Well, thank you, John, Dr. Damon. It's a pleasure to have had you here. I will, yes, Dina, the video will be sent out. We'll make it accessible. This is really important and powerful content that I think is truly appropriate, both as we start 2020 and you know, there are a lot of new beginnings, some as recently as yesterday. And so I think all of us, it's a good time for reflection and a good chance for a fresh start. So thank you so much, John, for taking the time and being so gracious with your time. This is, you know, content like this really speaks to me because it leaves me with both tangible constructs that I can really go back to, but also more abstract concepts that I need to play with and process. And so I like that balance between the two. So I really appreciate this. So with that, I do, you know, I do the self-promotion thing. So I want to highlight some great things that we have coming up at the Alliance. So get out your pens and pencils or your fingers for typing. And it's also something that you hopefully have seen in your programming spotlight. If you have not received that, let me know. So tomorrow from 10 to 11:30, we have recruiting, retaining, and developing staff in 2021. That's going to be an incredible training, really talking about how HR looks a bit different in this new world that we're in, which is absolutely relevant to all of us. On Monday, we are doing something new. We have an opportunity to host a federal grants management training. It's a three-parter. It's being conducted by Jerry Bertrand, who joins us from Austin. He works nationally and does this with many agencies. We are very excited to have him, and so we definitely would love to see you all there. Part one is Monday from 9 to 3, and then February 22nd, and then March 29th. So we hope that we get to see you all there for that. We have training, communications that develop results, and HR for the new normal next week. And then we are, just so you all know, 2 other sort of what we call learning tracks, or more longer form things that we're starting. One is establishing excellence, creating a great nonprofit. If you know anybody who's interested in starting a nonprofit, we now have a full year-long learning track for them where they go from I've got an idea to making it happen, and we guide them along the whole way. So I highly recommend, if you know anybody who's ever even thought about doing it and just wants some information or wants to just really dig in and get to work, we would love to have them. And so definitely please share that. And then the other thing, which some of you might have heard of in the past, is our Excellence in Action certification. So this certification started a little over 10 years ago. We've had over 400 individuals and 150 organizations who have become EIA certified. And essentially it's a certification on our national nonprofit and philanthropy principles and standards for excellence, nonprofit management. I'm sorry, I mixed up the name there a little bit. Principles and standards for nonprofit and philanthropy excellence. So I highly recommend that. It is going to be offered 6 times this year. It's typically done in about 6 modules or so. So we'll have a 6-month option. We have a 3-month option. We've got a boot camp that's coming up this summer, which will be over 3 days. So if you are interested in becoming EIA certified, definitely give me a holler and I will get up to that. So with that, that's all I've got. I know I just gave you a ton of information. We'd love to have you engage with the Alliance. So if you want to know more, give me a holler and I'd be happy to talk about any of this with you. Thank you again to all of you for taking the time to be here. And we certainly wish you the very best in 2021. And I hope that you all are making plans to turn your hopes into actualizations and laying a plan. So thank you again, Dr. John. It was a pleasure. And be safe, be well, everybody, and please wear your masks. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dave.